In this episode, we talk about turning to celebrities and athletes as a source of truth. Ready, set, go.
No information obtained from the following production is legal advice and does not create an attorney-client relationship with the law office IAJ, Law LLC, or any attorney or professional appearing on this program. You should consult an attorney for individualized advice regarding your own situation or specific legal concerns.
Broadcasting from Edina, Minnesota, your host, Attorney Jasper Berg. Hashtag Jasper.
Why, hello there. Thank you for joining. Yeah, give yourself a round of applause. I appreciate you joining me for Season 17, Episode number 7. Hopefully all is well where you are. And the idea of connecting today, well, first let me start on this. How is your April looking? Are you feeling a little bit of stress? Now, to the parents out there, or perhaps guardians of the elderly, April, I think, well, we're getting to the point of, oh crud, how is my summer planning going? Go back a couple of months when you started to work through the summer programming for your children or the older adults in your life that you are caring for. Imagine, just put yourself there. Personally, I think there's a tremendous amount of stress with that. You know, you have to log into a website. You have to do some research. You're looking for literature. You're identifying cost, interest levels, maybe contacting your grandparent. You know, hey, do you want to join a club that works on building puzzles? Or maybe a younger person in your life. Are they going to go to this camp or that camp? Is their friend going to join them? Is there transportation issues for the person in your life who's suffering from dementia and required to have some sort of assistance to get to that event? Maybe the stress doesn't come to you specifically until maybe, the month of May, Memorial Day, getting closer and closer to June 1st. But certainly right about now, the heat is on. There is might I suggest, stress. Trying to figure out, is this going to work or is this not? Now, if you haven't even done any planning for that, maybe this is the first you've heard of it, or maybe brought to your attention that you're going to have to jump on this. I apologize. I know what that can do. But the whole system of programming our summer weeks, whether at your job, with your vacation time, or hopefully you get vacation time, trying to determine when and how you're going to get that little one, or maybe that more mature student in your life to that location. A ridiculous amount of stress. No, but wait, it gets worse. Yeah. I know, it gets worse. Now imagine that you're not here to handle it. All of these perfect little nuances that you've created for yourself to stay on top of this, that's out the door. You are sick. You are on your deathbed. You're not there to manage it. Now, if you and perhaps you have a partner in your life and one person is in charge of the summer programming, maybe the other person's in charge of the financials, are you guys and gals seeing eye to eye? Or maybe you're the middle child in your family, and you are communicating with maybe a younger sister or an older sister or brother, whatever the dynamic is, and you have to coordinate. Hey, do you think this is good for mom? Now imagine you're not there to manage it. Who is going to pick up the papers, pick up the website, pick up that username, that account that is exclusive to your email address. Who's going to pick all that stuff up and carry it forward? Now, that year thereafter, the 12-month period thereafter, when we are sick or we are taking ourselves out of the equation for health reasons or otherwise, that is a miserable 12-month period. But there is a solution. There is a solution. And you probably aren't going to like it because it requires a little bit of work. You're managing your finances right now. You're managing someone else's finances right now because this is tax season. We are getting close to the end. Now is the best time to do the work. And this is what you do. You go to your favorite convenience store. You buy a notebook, a very unusual notebook. Something you could draw on, color on, use a permanent marker just to title it. Put it next to that spot that you know you're going to cater towards. Maybe where you put the mail. Maybe next to a computer in the home. But start taking notes. Now, about the second week in February, we get a publication. We go through it. We have about a week of time to identify what we're going to do for social activities for those that we care for. And just put it in the notebook. Maybe put down the website that you go to. Now, to our IT specialists out there, they're really not going to like this. Maybe identify a username and a password so that the next person up can take care of business. What we call TCOB. TCOB, taking care of business on your behalf. Well, again, I really appreciate you joining the show and sticking with me. If you want to call the studio hotline, you certainly can. My number directly, 952-222-9462. I accept phone calls all over the globe, believe it or not. Hey, Jasper, why would you get a phone call over the globe? That's a good question. Why do people in other countries contact me? I'll give you an answer. Because sometimes the men and women that I serve who are in the military are stationed, whether temporary or temporary permanent, maybe a permanent duty station. They are located in other parts of the world. Believe it or not, once you get past the border, there's other places. And we are there. So when I communicate with those who are overseas, usually it starts with an email because I get that email about 3 a.m, comes on in, and we can start discussing what's the best way to communicate. I have some encryption processes in place. We're not going to turn to your favorite, app that you can access. Well, heck, most of these bases and military institutions, you're not even allowed to use those resources. Rightfully so. Security risk. Anyways, you don't care why people outside the state of Minnesota might contact me, but maybe you find it interesting. But let's talk about, how comfortable are you with studying the brain? Yeah, your brain. Now, when you're studying or learning about the brain, you're probably doing so because somebody, whether you or somebody else in your family, has come across a brain injury. Or maybe you're curious about a brain injury. The reason why that I like to learn about the brain is because some of the people that I serve, there are some trigger points in the documents that I draft that require perhaps attention from a medical provider to identify certain cognitive issues. And in these documents, we want to purposely lay out what those trigger points are going to be. Now, I got some flack from episode number 6. I told a story about a person named Adam. Why are you picking on Adam? Why are you referring to a very, very specific individual? Well, the practice of law has a lot to do with human interaction, if not all of it. And with this human interaction, we are constantly, you and I both, perhaps you disagree, but you and I both are doing something called social learning. We are learning from other people. We're learning their mistakes and their successes. In the practice of law, this is absolutely critical. I'm constantly looking for resources to determine a person's behavior and whether or not that was a mistake or that was a success. And we call this social learning. And as a practitioner, this stuff just gets me going because I'm trying to put in perspective and help people make decisions based on other people's mistakes and other people's successes. And we can do this by turning towards celebrities and athletes. I'm not exactly sure why, but there's a strong majority of people out there who turn to the interwebs, the tabloids, or just the headlines, wherever you go for your news, and people and their decisions stands out. Whether those are good decisions or bad decisions. And the celebrity status and the athlete status really catches our attention. Boy, oh boy, did you see that particular athlete do that with their motor vehicle? Or that musician who failed to leave their last will and testament and distribute their intellectual property to their child, valued at $500+ million. And if you don't know who I'm referring to, well, you can check the internet. But I'll post a photo on my Instagram account. I visited a very, very specific location right down the street from my office. And I'm reminded by this mural. You should be reminded of these things too. Every time you are using an online resource, are you learning something about someone else's behavior that you can use to your advantage? And maybe we should back up. Are you doing any learning at all? Of course the answer is yes. Now, when I present that question to some of the presentations I've made recently, I challenge some people. When was the last time you picked up a book and just read an article about some of the decisions you're trying to make and planning documents you're looking to implement? So a lot of times I'm educating a person for the very first time who's trying to weigh the pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages. And more often than not, the social learning that's taken place previous to that discussion is helping facilitate where the conversation may go. I really want to start not at the top and trickle down, meaning let's not talk about the real small intricacies that we can sprinkle on top of any sort of planning process. Let's talk about what you're really, really afraid of. What have you seen that you don't want to happen in your family? Or what have you seen around you? We forget that we are in charge of teaching the next generation, whether you have children next of kin, or you are teaching your nephews and nieces, or just teaching your own adult sibling. This is a constant thing. And when we are talking about building relationships, who can you trust? Well, you want to turn to the people you've seen make what you view as good decisions. And we can learn from this. And as I've interacted in my practice with medical providers who are caring for loved ones or trying to identify solutions to various dementia, Alzheimer's, other types of brain issues, we sometimes forget that a lot of this goes back to our teenage years of just simply trying to figure out what can we trust and what can we not. That game that you play, you tell your best friend, oh, I have a crush on this person, but don't tell that person. Now, you have an expectation of trust. That expectation is your friend or that interaction will not result in that person sharing that information with another person. But what's the actual result? Well, whatever that actual result ends up being, that is shaping our social learning. And if you're looking to explore this topic even further, you can get into the parts of the brain, whether the prefrontal cortex behind your forehead or the striatum on the side of your head. And when these parts of the brain, as I understand it from other medical professionals, when they are unable to make those decisions or decode when something is enjoyable or rewarding, that can be a problem. And you've probably seen it in your own family. I'll see you after the break. All right, thanks for joining me again. Segment number 2. Let's talk about the word unemployment. I help people who are confronted with unemployment challenges, one of many aspects of my employment law practice. It's usually the first element, because after one has lost their job for whatever reason, whether they quit their job voluntarily, maybe they were constructively let go, whether they were presented with some sort of separation agreement, they were fired, a layoff, whatever the reason is, the next question that pops into the head is, what am I going to do for income? And that's where this unemployment stuff kicks in, and a person finds the website, applying for benefits or considering applying for benefits. Now, between you and me, should never be applying for benefits, an hour removed of your job ending. In fact, I would extend that to a couple of days, maybe even more. And there's good reason for that. Generally, it's because of emotion and failing to identify what will help a claim for benefits and what will not. Every one of their questions is a trick question. But before I came onto the show today, I did a quick search. And, I have legal software and legal subscriptions and platforms and whatever fancy IT word you want to come up with. where I'm constantly trying to educate myself on the victories and the mistakes that people have made with whatever decision making that they're trying to accomplish to help themselves move on to that next step. And this legal precedent, or another way of saying these court cases that have been decided by some sort of human being called a judge, are put out there constantly. I mean, you could spend your whole darn day looking at court cases that have been decided for a previous exchanging of events that might date back a month, events that might date back many years, even decades. We see that all the time. It's a lot to absorb. And more often than not, those that I serve, they don't have the time to go back and conduct that research, looking for these mistakes, looking for these victories to help themselves. So if you were to just do a simple search using some of these fancy legal softwares, and you just used the word unemployment, it would trigger a search result just in the jurisdiction of Minnesota. It would create a search result of approximately 3,400 cases, public cases that have reached at least the Court of Appeals level. That means there is a ridiculous history to get to that point. And a person or an employer or somebody has decided they've invested time and resources, and that result was not in their favor, or there's a reason that they need to appeal. And as a result, they're going to take it to another level and make it a public type situation. Well, there's about 3,400 of those in the history of Minnesota. Do you find that to be a lot, or do you find that to be very insignificant? That's a lot of literature just for the word unemployment. How do you use that to your advantage? You got to use it to your advantage. You're hurting yourself. You're hurting your family if you don't. I don't know, just something to think about. Well, that is the chopper. The chopper's coming. That means I'm going to take a brief second and identify a problem that I'm seeing with some more mature military families out there. Have you cleaned out the house of a deceased family member who served in the military maybe 40, 50 years ago? Have you done this? You know, there's one item that I'm constantly asked about on what do we do with this. And you know what that item is? Military uniforms. I don't know. Your service has been done. You're on your very last day. You can't wait to get home. Leading up to that point, you had to pack your bags. And you're leaving on a jet plane, going back to where it all started. So you stuff all your uniforms in this bag. You get to where you're going. You put that bag in the closet. And funny, you don't open that bag again for 50 years. I see it all the time. Except people don't do anything with it. What do you do with your military uniforms? So here's a very, very brief list of what I think you may want to consider as part of your process of your military uniforms. Here's why. Because when we die, someone's going to have to do something with it. And you failed to do anything with it. And now you have a loved one who's never even seen a military installation before, has no idea all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into you obtaining, wearing, earning, and taking off that uniform. And now they got to make a choice. What do you do? And then they turn to me. what do I do as a family member to my deceased member of my family who didn't do anything with their military uniforms? Well, this is my recommendation. There's really two trains of thought here. Did you enjoy your service, or do you curse it every day going forward? In both situations, I think the answer is the same. You remove all of your insignia. You remove all of your patches, especially the patch that refers to your name. Now, if certain areas of the uniform, you had to identify maybe the last 4 digits of your social security number, maybe the last 3 letters of your last name, maybe your initials, something went on a tag somewhere. If there is a tag of any kind on your uniform, and of course you have multiple uniforms, so you're going to have to do this over and over and over and over again. You did it for your shirt, you did it for your pants, did it for your socks, whatever. You put it on the tongue of your boots, the tongue of your shoes, Class A's, Class B's. You put it everywhere. Let's remove that. Now, personally, I love the idea of taking all the patches, whether it's 01 through 09, E1 through E9, the collection of those patches, and you just put them off to the side. Take them all off. In fact, you're not even going to like this piece. Go get a scissors and cut them off. And I can't tell you how taboo it is and how ugly it feels to be cutting out your patches, especially if you serve, say, back in Vietnam. You're on the officer side, and they forced you to spend 70% of your first 6 months of your paycheck while serving overseas, and you had to pay for your own uniform. Now, we'll get back to that hypocrisy on a future date. But that is a major problem. You know how much it took to get that uniform perfectly. You spent hours. Now you're going to cut them apart. And it's going to sting. It's going to hurt. But you got to do something with it. So take all those patches, put them off to the side. Now off to the right, you have all these uniforms. What do you do with them? There's going to be some family member in the back. Yes? Go ahead and raise your hand. Who says, we got to donate these. We got to donate them. You know what my response to that is? The heck with it. Nobody wants them. I'm going to donate them to a museum. Come on. Who are you kidding? Nobody wants them. And those that do, you don't have time to go through that exchange because you got to worry about these other assets over here. So when it comes to your uniforms, I know, again, all kinds of blood, sweat, and tear went into that uniform. But you got to make this choice on behalf of your loved ones because they are going to be stuck. And it kills me to have to make that decision to dispose of that uniform, especially after everything you've been through. But that's what you got to do. Now, you may save a hat, Class A's. That's a big deal. You may save a BDU shirt, a belt, what have you, rain gear, a pouch for your cam gear, or your mop gear, excuse me. But unfortunately, you're going to have to make a tough choice. I love the idea of keeping those insignias. I love the idea of keeping those patches. I think that says a lot. You can build something very, very special, maybe a shadow box in the future for your family members, for yourself. But then we got to talk about what to do with that shadow box. We'll talk about that later. But these are things that that I think, there's the music. You got to do it. You got to do it. Thanks for joining. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.
Jasper thanks you for listening. Please subscribe or share this production.
Celebs.